At Starbond, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or manufactured content. And what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Dustin Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's get into today's story. The hologram of Arbiter Kalos wavered before General Elena Torres, a 9-foot column of shimmering crystalline energy that radiated superiority. Torres stood at attention on the Vanguard's bridge, her image transmitted across dozens of light years to the conclave assembly. She maintained perfect military bearing while internally composing sarcastic observations about Kalos's species' tendency toward pomposity. The Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with rhythmic light patterns, his translation matrix rendering his communication into standard. General Torres, we have analyzed the tactical data from your engagement with the Draxian Armada in the Bellis system. Your victory was absolute. Torres's voice remained flat and professional. That was the objective, Arbiter. Behind Kalos, holographic representatives from 36 species flickered, their avatars showing various states of agitation and concern. Most recoiled from what they had witnessed. Kalos's crystalline structure brightened. You transmitted false distress signals across all frequencies. You ordered your fleet to simulate catastrophic system failures and execute what appeared to be a panicked, uncoordinated withdrawal. You deliberately drew the entire Draxian force into the Meridian asteroid field where your reconnaissance vessels had deployed autonomous plasma mines 72 hours prior. While the Draxians oriented their defensive shields forward to pursue your retreating ships, the mines detonated along their engine sections, triggering a cascade of reactor explosions that destroyed every vessel in their fleet. Torres allowed several seconds of silence before responding. As I stated, Arbiter, the victory was absolute. Kalos's form strobed with agitation. You deceived them, General. You feigned vulnerability to construct an elaborate trap. This methodology is fundamentally dishonorable. It constitutes deception. The translator struggled with the final word, as if the concept itself was distasteful. I am human, Arbiter. Deception is integral to our strategic heritage. We find it remarkably effective. Torres allowed herself a thin smile. May I present my fleet's casualty report from the Bellis engagement? Her aide triggered a display showing a single number, 0. And now, Torres continued, her voice dropping to a harder edge, I would like to present the casualty report from the Crystalline Third Fleet's most recent honorable engagement with the Draxians at the Battle of Helix Prime. Another display materialized showing devastating numbers. 87% of vessels destroyed or disabled, 94% crew casualties. Kalos's crystalline form blazed with indignation. The heroes of Helix Prime faced their destiny with courage and honor. They confronted the enemy in direct combat, as warriors should. Torres's response was immediate and sharp. They confronted the enemy in direct combat and died. My people confronted their engines with strategically placed explosives and lived. I fail to comprehend how the Crystallian outcome is preferable. Kalos's form intensified, his light patterns becoming harsh and discordant, because a dishonorable victory corrodes the soul of civilization. Your tactics, General Torres, echo the great catastrophe. That conflict began with deceptions and false surrenders. It culminated in biological weapons deployed against unsuspecting populations. An entire species was eradicated because their conquerors refused to face them in open battle. We established the Valdris Protocols to prevent such atrocities from recurring. Torres stood firm, recognizing the Conclave's favorite cautionary tale, the ultimate justification for rules designed to maximize bloodshed while minimizing strategic thinking. Kalos's crystalline structure consolidated, focusing his light into a concentrated beam. Your methods are dangerous, General. They invite catastrophic escalation. Therefore, this tribunal is proposing a universal amendment to the Valdris Protocols, effective upon ratification. Henceforth, we shall classify any form of strategic misdirection as a Class 1 war crime. No deceptions, no ambushes, no tactical subterfuge. All combatants must engage directly, announce their intentions clearly, and fight with honor. He paused, letting the pronouncement resonate through the chamber. Your victory, General Torres, will be the final one of its kind. Torres stared at the shimmering fool who was about to sentence millions to death, and for the first time during the hearing, her composure fractured. Her jaw tightened into a hard line as cold certainty settled over her. She was surrounded by idiots who valued ritual over results, theater over triumph. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor. Torres watched the results scroll across the Vanguard's main display, each affirmative vote sealing the fate of rational warfare. Her senior staff stood around the holographic projection, their expressions tight with suppressed anger. Commander Hayes, her executive officer, clenched his jaw until a vein pulsed at his temple. They actually did it, Hayes muttered, his voice barely controlled. They've criminalized thinking. They've criminalized winning, Torres corrected, taking a long drink of bitter coffee. From this moment forward, we arrange our ships in neat rows. They arrange theirs, and we fire until one side is obliterated. That's not warfare, that's arithmetic. Moments later, a priority directive appeared on her command console from Coalition High Command, already implementing the Conclave's mandate. Her new orders were brutally simple. Proceed to Hydra Sector, engage Draxian 6th and 8th Fleets, conduct combat in strict accordance with newly ratified Valdris Protocol Amendment 731, maintain direct line-of-battle engagement with no deviations permitted, and break the blockade. Hayes read over her shoulder. Ma'am, those odds are brutal. The 6th and 8th outnumber us significantly. Their ships have superior mass. A direct engagement will be a slaughter. Torres's voice was low and taut. I'm aware, Commander. She closed the directive, the afterimage of its words burning in her mind. They were ordering her to preside over a massacre, to sacrifice her ships and crews on the altar of alien honor codes. The bridge fell silent, except for the ambient hum of life support systems. The crew were professionals who would follow orders, but their body language communicated everything. Shoulders tight, eyes averted, hands moving with mechanical precision. Then an unusual signal chimed on her personal communications array, encrypted through multiple relay points and deliberately untraceable. She glanced at her console's corner, where coordinates and a timestamp appeared, pointing to a turbulent nebula called the Phantom Shroud, a region where sensor arrays filled with interference and communication signals vanished into background radiation. Torres looked at those coordinates, then back at the suicide mission on her screen. The Conclave wanted her to play their game, where the prize for losing was death, and the reward for winning was more death. In that moment, she decided to stop playing by their rules. Torres's personal shuttle, the Resolute, was a compact vessel designed for short-range operations, which made it perfect for her needs. Her official flight plan logged an inspection tour of the fleet's outer reconnaissance posts. Her official communications log would report a critical navigation malfunction near the Phantom Shroud, forcing her to maintain communications silence while effecting repairs. The lie was transparent enough for the records, but plausible enough to be dismissed later. She piloted the shuttle herself through the swirling ionized gases, the nebula painting her cockpit in shifting shades of violet and emerald. The Shroud lived up to its reputation, her sensor screen flickering with phantom contacts and cascading false readings. But the coordinates were precise. Right on schedule, a vessel materialized from the cosmic interference. A Synthari ship emerged, its design unlike anything else in the galaxy. The craft was biomechanical, a seamless fusion of living tissue and dark metallic alloys that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Stark, efficient, beautiful in its alien functionality. A single docking umbilical extended from its hull like an invitation. Torres guided the Resolute in, magnetic clamps locking with a solid thud. The atmosphere inside the Synthari vessel was thin and cold, carrying a sharp scent like ozone and crystallized minerals. Waiting in the minimalist airlock was a being as stark as his ship. Fleetmaster Draven stood balanced on 3 supporting limbs, his 2 arms long and segmented with multiple joints. His skin was dense fibrous integument the color of volcanic glass, patterned with luminescent lines that resembled circuit pathways. His head was an elongated teardrop housing a single horizontal ocular lens that wrapped halfway around his skull. Every movement was perfectly efficient, each gesture flowing with uniform precision. "General Torres," he stated, his voice a flat, uninflected baritone produced by resonating plates in his thorax. "Fleetmaster Draven," Torres replied with a brief nod. "Thank you for the meeting. Your message was appropriately discreet." "Discretion is a logical requirement for this discussion," Draven said, his silver lens scanning her with analytical intensity. "The Conclave's new law is inefficient. It will result in species extinction for those who prioritize survival over spectacle." Torres raised an eyebrow. "Spectacle. The Crystallians perceive warfare as performance art," Draven clarified in his emotionless tone. "They prioritize the aesthetic quality of combat over its outcome. This is a fundamentally flawed premise." "I concur," Torres said carefully. "But what do you propose?" "The Draxian Dominion threatens Synthari space. Direct engagement as mandated by the protocols would degrade our fleet capability by 48% within 36 standard months. This attrition rate is unacceptable. Your human coalition faces similar projections." "At minimum," Torres agreed grimly. "Therefore, we require an alternative approach," Draven continued. "My proposal: our primary fleets will maintain the public appearance of adhering to Conclave doctrine. They will engage in observable, honorable combat on a limited scale, satisfying crystalline oversight." He paused, his silver lens fixed on hers. "Simultaneously, a covert force comprising human and Synthari assets operating through unofficial channels will prosecute the war according to logical, effective principles." Torres smiled, her expression sharp and calculating. "You're proposing a shadow war, Fleetmaster." "I am proposing a war we can win," he corrected. "The Conclave's law is an obstacle. We will operate around it. We will be phantoms, unseen and unofficial. We will attribute our actions to sensor anomalies, Draxian incompetence, and stellar phenomena." He extended his hand, clearly having studied the human gesture, though it was foreign to his species. "One principle binds us, General: victory at minimum cost." Torres looked at his complex, segmented hand. He was offering her a way out, a way to fight, a way to save her people from the glorious honorable death the Conclave had mandated. She had expected negotiation. Instead, she found a ready-made conspiracy. She clasped his hand, feeling the cool, mineral texture of his skin. "One principle," Torres agreed: "victory at minimum cost." Draven tilted his head a precise fraction of a degree. "Excellent. I have compiled preliminary target assessments. The Draxians maintain a network of fuel depots in the Tartarus expanse, defended minimally. Their destruction would cripple the Hydra blockade's long-range operational capacity." He had come prepared. Torres was beginning to appreciate him. Torres's covert strike group, officially designated Long-Range Reconnaissance Squadron 12, consisted of 4 frigates and 1 light cruiser. Their orders were to patrol the Tartarus expanse's outer boundary and maintain strict communications silence to avoid detection. No one would expect them to initiate combat. All ships report status. Torres ordered from the frigate Phantom's compact command center. Her flagship, the Vanguard, remained with the main fleet preparing for its honorable suicide engagement at the Hydra blockade. Status reports filtered in, all systems optimal. Fleetmaster Draven, she said, addressing the holographic projection displaying the Synthari commander's passive form. Your fleet is in position? Affirmative, General, Draven replied. My vessels have activated stealth systems at the designated coordinates. Awaiting your signal. Excellent. Launch the decoys. From concealed launchers on the frigates, 15 small probes shot into the void. Moments later, they activated their systems. To any long-range sensor array, a massive coalition fleet had just emerged from faster-than-light transit. The probes projected holographic ship signatures and mimicked the energy patterns of 3 dozen battlecruisers and destroyers. We have their attention, the sensor officer reported with satisfaction. Draxian Defense Patrol, departing Depot Charlie, is turning to intercept. They're powering weapons systems. As predicted, Draven stated, their tactical doctrine is rigid. They must respond to a direct threat with direct force. Torres watched the tactical display. 6 massive Draxian cruisers charged toward empty space, their guns blazing at phantoms. She might as well have been watching a predator trying to fight a hologram. They've cleared the depot's defensive perimeter, Torres announced. Fleetmaster, you have the initiative. Acknowledged, Draven replied. New icons appeared on the display near the now vulnerable fuel depot. The Synthari strike force decloaked, their biomechanical hulls emerging from the void like shards of night. They maneuvered as one entity, their movements synchronized to the microsecond. Focused energy lances, razor-thin beams of coherent light, stabbed outward and pierced the massive fuel storage tanks. Though space transmitted no sound, the sight was spectacular. The depot erupted in a series of silent, blossoming fireballs, bright enough to momentarily eclipse distant stars. The Draxian patrol, realizing the deception, reversed course, but far too late. By the time they arrived, the Synthari had vanished back into the void's embrace, cloaked once more. The Draxian ships circled the wreckage of their depot, their communications channels lighting up with confused and furious transmissions. The Coalition Phantom fleet had disappeared as mysteriously as it had materialized. The Conclave would see only a routine patrol report from Reconnaissance Squadron 12. The Synthari left no official trace. Aboard the Phantom, a thin, grim smile pulled at Torres's lips. She was now officially a war criminal by Conclave standards. A spark of exhilaration shot through her, unsettling yet welcome. The secure virtual meeting space was a featureless gray grid extending to infinity, populated only by participant avatars. Torres's human command staff appeared solid and defined, while Draven's officers manifested as sleek silver silhouettes. The fuel depot raids have disrupted their fleet operations, Torres began, pacing the virtual floor. But the Draxians are fundamentally a ground power. Their strength lies in their ground armies, their legions of heavily armored warriors. To win decisively, we need to cripple their ability to conquer and hold planets. We need a method that avoids costly planetary invasions. Direct orbital bombardment is inefficient, Draven's avatar stated, his synthesized voice flat. They have fortified their core worlds extensively. The material cost of breaching those defenses is prohibitive. So starvation is ineffective and bombardment is futile, Commander Hayes summarized. That leaves ground warfare, which we've already established is untenable. A junior intelligence officer, a lean young lieutenant named Reeves with restless energy, cleared his throat nervously. General, Permission to propose an unconventional approach? Torres gestured for him to continue. The floor is yours, Lieutenant. The more unconventional, the better at this point. Reeves straightened. I've been studying 20th and 21st century human history, specifically psychological warfare campaigns. There's a recurring principle. An enemy who doubts his own strength is already half defeated. He brought up a holographic image showing a Draxian warrior in full battle armor, a bipedal mountain of layered alloy, and muscle wielding a plasma rifle the size of a human torso. Draxian culture is built on a foundation of physical superiority and martial pride, Reeves explained. Their honor is tied directly to their strength. They believe they are the galaxy's strongest species, and their victories have consistently reinforced this worldview. What if we could introduce doubt? He swiped the image, replacing it with a design schematic showing a standard Draxian rifle power cell. Next to it, he placed another schematic for a power cell 5 times larger. I'm calling it Operation Inferiority Complex, Reeves said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. We mass-produce a series of inert, oversized Draxian weapon components. Power cells the size of their helmets, bayonets that look like broadswords, armor plates designed for being 12 feet tall. Then we forge technical schematics, label them standard-issue human infantry, and covertly drop these components and plans onto their garrison worlds. The virtual room went silent. Torres stared at the schematics, a slow smile spreading across her face. Hayes looked like he was trying to decide whether Reeves was brilliant or insane. The objective is psychological destabilization, Reeves continued, speaking faster now. The average Draxian soldier finds this equipment. He struggles to lift the power cell and discovers it won't fit his weapon. He examines the schematics. He reaches one of 2 conclusions. Either human technology is so advanced that our standard equipment is massive, implying we're a race of giants, or his own high command has issued him inferior equipment while reserving superior gear for elite units. Either interpretation breeds paranoia and insecurity throughout their ranks. All the silver Synthari silhouettes turned toward Draven. For a long moment, the Fleetmaster's avatar remained motionless, his subordinates clearly running probability calculations. Finally, Draven's avatar spoke. The logic is chaotic. Reeves deflated slightly. However, Draven continued, the projected outcome is highly efficient. Disrupting enemy command cohesion through psychological means represents significant resource conservation. The material investment is minimal, while the potential impact on enemy morale is substantial. He turned his featureless silver head toward Torres's holographic form. Proceed, General. Torres clapped the young lieutenant on the shoulder, the gesture passing through his holographic form. Reeves, you magnificent devious bastard. Make it happen. They timed the deployment on the fortress world of Craxus to coincide with a heavy meteor shower. A swarm of cloaked Synthari drones mimicking the signatures of falling space debris descended through the upper atmosphere, dropping precisely crafted crates filled with meticulously designed, oversized equipment. On the Phantom's bridge, Torres and Draven monitored the results through a network of microscopic Synthari listening devices seated on the planet weeks earlier. The initial intercepts were pure gold. What do you mean it's too large? A gruff Draxian voice demanded. The garrison commander's voice rumbled like grinding stone. Explain yourself clearly. As I stated, Commander, a subordinate replied, confusion evident in his tone. The power cell is the size of my helmet. The schematic markings clearly indicate this is the standard model for human infantry rifles. Impossible, the commander growled. They are small, fragile creatures. This must be a deception. Perhaps, the subordinate said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Or perhaps the warriors we've encountered on the front lines are atypical. There are rumors of elite shock troops, Titans they call them, genetically enhanced giants. The rumor, naturally, had originated with Coalition intelligence operatives on a remote trading station 2 months prior, carefully seeded into the information ecosystem. They listened as another commander accused a rival of hoarding the superior human-sized equipment for his own troops while leaving standard units with inferior gear. The accused took this as a grave insult to his honor and demanded a formal duel. Within 3 planetary rotations, internal disputes had resulted in 7 high-ranking Draxian officers dead from honor duels on Craxus alone. Unit cohesion plummeted. Reports of insubordination and internal conflict skyrocketed. The garrison, once a formidable fighting force, had turned on itself, all because of a few crates of oversized inert equipment. Torres leaned back in her command chair, listening to a recording of 2 Draxian sergeants arguing heatedly about whether humans could bench press a light armored vehicle. Analyzing the data streams, Draven said from the holographic projector, command effectiveness on the target world has decreased by 63%. This operation has exceeded efficiency projections. He paused. This tactic of weaponized absurdity is novel to Synthari strategic doctrine. It represents an intriguing approach. It's a core competency for humans, Torres said with a smirk. You should see our historical information warfare campaigns. They constituted an entire weapon class. A priority chime from her personal console interrupted the moment. A direct summons from Arbiter Kalos appeared on her screen. Her smile vanished instantly. Kalos's holographic form seemed to dominate her ready room, his crystalline structure pulsing with cold, interrogative intensity. He dispensed with pleasantries. General Torres, the Conclave has noted a series of inexplicable logistical failures within the Draxian Dominion. His translated voice was sharp, each word an implied accusation. Fuel depots spontaneously combusting. Garrison forces dissolving into internecine conflicts. The statistical pattern is highly irregular. War is inherently chaotic, Arbiter, Torres said, her hands clasped behind her back in a neutral posture. Chaos affects all sides equally. Chaos, Kalos countered, his light pattern swirling faster, does not exclusively benefit forces under your operational authority. This pattern appears specifically advantageous to your theater of operations. He leaned forward, his crystalline form intensifying. I will ask you directly, General. Have you or any forces under your command engaged in activities prohibited under Valdris Protocol Amendment 731? Torres met his gaze steadily. Arbiter, my primary battle fleet, under the direct command of Commander Hayes, has engaged the enemy in a series of direct line-of-battle encounters exactly as mandated. We have maintained our position at the Hydra blockade and conducted ourselves with complete honor. Every word was technically true. Her covert operations were separate from Battle Group Vanguard. Reconnaissance Squadron 12 operated as an independent unit. The Synthari functioned under their own command structure. She had constructed her answer with legal precision. Kalos's light flickered with frustration. He had suspicions, but no proof. The Draxians were too proud to ever admit that ghosts and pranksters were systematically dismantling their operations. To them, it was merely unfortunate coincidence and internal weakness. I note your semantic precision, General, Kalos said, his crystalline tones turning cold. Nevertheless, these anomalies are making the Conclave's strategy of honorable engagement appear ineffective. The crystalline fleets are suffering significant casualties for every meter of space gained while your sector reports victory after victory with suspiciously minimal losses. He drew himself up to his full imposing height. Circumstantial evidence is insufficient for judgment. Therefore, I am personally deploying aboard the diplomatic vessel Radiant Herald to the Hydra sector. I will observe your operations directly and mediate the conflict to ensure absolute compliance with the protocols. A cold knot formed in Torres's stomach. A mediator, an observer, a warden watching her every move. I warn you, General. Kalos's voice was flat and absolute, leaving no room for interpretation. I will discover any breach of the protocols, regardless of how minor, and it will result in humanity's immediate expulsion from the Galactic Conclave and the implementation of a full economic and military quarantine against your species. The hologram vanished, leaving Torres alone in the quiet of her ready room, staring at empty space. The clock was ticking, Kalos was coming, and he was coming to watch her soldiers die honorably. The report from Commander Hayes was waiting when she returned to the bridge. She opened the file with heavy reluctance. It contained bridge recordings from the Vanguard's latest proper engagement. Hayes's fleet had arranged themselves in precise formation as the protocols demanded, exchanging broadsides in the approved honorable fashion. The Draxian ships, more massive and more numerous, absorbed the punishment and returned fire with devastating effect. The Coalition cruiser Steadfast buckled, its spine fractured by a volley of kinetic projectiles. The destroyer Resolute was torn open, its compartments venting atmosphere and bodies into the void's embrace. Hayes kept his voice steady throughout, calling out targets, managing damage control teams, holding the formation. The casualty count was horrific. Steadfast and Resolute destroyed. The battlecruiser Indomitable crippled beyond repair. 2,117 casualties, dead or maimed. 2,117 people sacrificed because a 9-foot crystalline entity believed ducking was dishonorable. They had held the line, even pushed the Draxians back slightly. A victory by Conclave standards, purchased with blood and bodies. Torres closed the file, her grip on the data tablet tightening until her knuckles whitened. This was the cost of Kalos's honor. This was the price of the Valdris protocols. She visualized the faces of her lost crew, young men and women she had sent to their deaths in a fight they could have won without a single casualty if only they had been permitted to think. Any lingering doubt evaporated. Her purpose crystallized into singular focus. Kalos wanted to mediate, wanted to observe, wanted to ensure compliance. She would give him a resolution, but it would be on her terms, not his. She opened a secure channel to Draven, her voice hard with determination. Fleetmaster, our timeline has accelerated. We're ending this war immediately. A brief pause, then his flat reply. Specify your operational requirements, General. I require a method to collapse the entire Draxian command structure simultaneously, she said. All of it at once, in a single coordinated strike. Another pause, longer this time. She could almost hear the computational processes running through Synthari neural networks. There exists a theoretical possibility, Draven finally said. It involves experimental Synthari technology. The approach is highly unorthodox. Torres felt a predatory gleam enter her eyes. Fleetmaster, you have my complete and undivided attention. We designate it the dissonance engine, Draven explained, his avatar displaying a complex schematic of a device resembling a nest of interwoven resonant filaments and crystalline matrices. It functions as a broadcast system. Torres studied the schematic, her brow furrowing in concentration. Broadcasting what? Propaganda? Disinformation? Something more fundamental, Draven stated. Intelligence analysis has determined that Draxian social structure is enforced through both cultural conditioning and biological mechanisms. A low-level psionic network connects every Draxian to their immediate superior, creating a hierarchical chain that culminates in supreme warlord cracks. This transmission of command authority ensures absolute loyalty and instantaneous obedience. A hive mind, Hayes said, looking skeptical. A biological command and control network, Draven corrected. Each individual retains personal identity and consciousness, but the will of their superior constantly influences their decision-making processes. This is what makes them exceptionally effective, if strategically inflexible, soldiers. They execute orders without hesitation or question. And this engine, Torres prompted, leaning forward with interest, what does it do to this network? It injects contradictory signals into the psionic network, Draven explained, his tone remaining flat and analytical. Specifically, it generates emotional feedback loops and conflicting authority markers. The effect severs the connection between a Draxian warrior and his commander, leaving him connected only to his own paranoia, ambition, and fear. Torres felt understanding dawn. You're weaponizing their greatest strength, turning it into their greatest vulnerability. Instant systemic chaos. Correct, Draven confirmed. The Synthari societal network operates on substantially more complex principles, which provided us the unique perspective required to devise such a countermeasure. The engine should theoretically cause their entire command hierarchy to collapse into a cascade of infighting, paranoia, and complete breakdown of unit cohesion. He paused, his silver lens focusing on her avatar. However, there is a significant limitation. The broadcast range is constrained by power requirements. To achieve full effectiveness, we must activate the engine within close proximity to the primary network node, Supreme Warlord Krax himself. Specifically, his orbital command station above Draxus Prime, their capital world. Hayes swore under his breath. That's the most heavily fortified location in the entire Dominion. Approaching within weapons range would be a suicide mission. Torres shifted her attention to another display on the tactical grid, a catalog of captured enemy assets. Near the top of the list was a Draxian dreadnought, the Iron Hammer. A notation flashed beside its designation. Status: faster-than-light drive mountings require specialized dry dock facilities for repair. Recommend salvage for materials. Low priority. An idea formed in her mind, ancient and audacious. A plan so steeped in deception it would make Arbiter Kalos's crystalline form physically shatter. She looked at the captured dreadnought's image, a massive ugly beast of a warship, bristling with armor and weapon emplacements. The ship was the key to everything. Torres assembled her human and Synthari command staff in the virtual grid space. An anticipatory tension settled over the assembled avatars as they waited for her to speak. She laid out her plan with calm precision, her voice steady and controlled. We are going to take the captured Draxian dreadnought, the Iron Hammer. We will rename it the Mercy of Krax. We will stage an elaborate mock battle, inflicting extensive cosmetic damage to the vessel's exterior while leaving all critical systems intact. Then we will load the ship with a joint human Synthari strike force and the dissonance engine. She paused, letting the first part sink in before delivering the final piece. And then we are going to offer this ship back to Supreme Warlord Krax as a gesture of goodwill, a demonstration that we are adhering to the Conclave's new honorable rules of warfare, a symbol of our commitment to the Valdris protocols. The human officers stared at her in stunned silence. The Synthari avatars froze, processing the proposition with their analytical minds. Draven was the first to speak, a rare note of uncertainty entering his synthesized voice. General, let me ensure I understand the tactical model correctly. We are proposing to conceal our primary assault force inside an enemy vessel, and then voluntarily deliver this vessel directly to the enemy's central command facility. That's precisely the plan, yes, Torres confirmed. What is the strategic precedent for this approach? Draven asked. Voluntarily surrendering a functional weapon system containing an elite military force contradicts fundamental tactical principles. Torres allowed herself a wide, predatory smile. It's an ancient human stratagem, Fleet Master. We call it the Trojan Horse. The Synthari avatars all turned toward Draven simultaneously. His translation matrix must have been working frantically, searching databases for cultural and linguistic equivalents that didn't exist in Synthari history. He looked back at Torres, his silver lens steady. Explain this Trojan horse concept. The human officers leaned forward eagerly in their virtual chairs, anticipating the story. Well, Fleetmaster, Torres began, her voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller relating her favorite historical tale. A very long time ago, on our homeworld, there was a city called Troy. Torres's covert fleet, Reconnaissance Squadron 12, encountered the captured dreadnought, now renamed the Mercy of Cracks and crewed by a skeleton Synthari team maintaining minimal systems. They broadcast the engagement on open channels, knowing full well that Draxian listening posts would intercept every transmission. Low-powered laser batteries painted spectacular but superficial scars across the dreadnought's thick armor plating. Plasma torpedoes, with their warheads replaced by inert mass, detonated in brilliant flashes that left the shields fundamentally undamaged. The finale was a stroke of tactical theater devised by Lieutenant Reeves. The Coalition frigate Dauntless executed a sacrificial attack run, firing its main weapon at point-blank range before a shot from the dreadnought's primary cannon appeared to vaporize it completely. In reality, the Dauntless had engaged its cloaking system at the precise moment of impact, while a deployed decoy exploded dramatically for any observers. To anyone watching, it appeared the dreadnought had successfully destroyed an attacker before succumbing to accumulated damage. The massive ship went dark, venting streams of glowing plasma from strategically sabotaged conduits in a convincing display of critical failure. They're crippled and dead in space. Torres broadcast on an open, unencrypted channel, her voice tight with feigned frustration. Disengage and withdraw. As per the Valdris protocols, we must leave a helpless vessel intact and unharmed. Let the Supreme Warlord recover his broken toy. Her fleet turned and retreated in good order, leaving the bait floating in the silent darkness of space. On the command bridge orbiting Draxus Prime, Supreme Warlord Krax watched the transmission and laughed, the sound like an avalanche of boulders. "They flee," he bellowed, his massive armored form shaking with mirth. The soft-skinned creatures lose one vessel, and their courage evaporates. His bridge officers, all hulking Draxian warriors, roared their approval and beat their gauntlet fists against their chest plates. A communications officer turned from his console. "Supreme Warlord, we have an incoming transmission from Coalition General Torres." "Display it," Krax commanded, still grinning with savage satisfaction. Torres's face appeared on the main view screen, her expression carefully neutral and professional. "Supreme Warlord Krax, my fleet has disengaged in accordance with the Valdris protocols. We are leaving the disabled dreadnought Mercy of Krax for you to recover. May it serve as evidence of the Conclave's commitment to honorable warfare." The transmission ended abruptly. Krax's commanders muttered among themselves with suspicion. "It's obviously a trap," one of them growled. "The ship could contain explosive devices or active surveillance systems. They could be monitoring us." Krax slammed a massive gauntlet fist on his command throne's armrest, denting the reinforced metal. "Silence!" Then he grinned savagely. "Then we will give them a performance worth watching. Activate full-spectrum jamming fields around the vessel during recovery and towing operations. Let the Coalition see nothing but static interference." He stared at the drifting dreadnought's image on his screen. The act itself communicated weakness on a fundamental level. The Conclave had shackled humanity, forced them to fight with honor and proper protocol, and this was the inevitable result. They were proving themselves as cowards, abandoning a prize they lacked the strength to claim or destroy. "This is a monument to their inadequacy," Krax declared, his voice dripping with contempt. "They could not destroy our vessel, so they surrender it to us, like whimpering children. We will bring it here, repair it, and it will serve as a permanent reminder of their pathetic, honor-bound weakness." He gestured at the screen with a thick claw. "Dispatch the recovery teams immediately. Tow that symbol of human frailty home." On an open channel, he transmitted his own reply to the Coalition fleet, a short, guttural roar of mocking laughter that echoed across the sector, a sound of pure derision. Lieutenant Chun sat with her squad in the mercy of Krax's cavernous unlit cargo bay, the air cold and thick, with the smell of engine lubricant and nervous sweat barely masked by life support scrubbers. Around her, 40 Coalition Marines and 30 Synthari warriors sat in absolute silence, weapons held ready and checked repeatedly. They were the spear point, the blade that would pierce the heart of the Draxian Dominion. Low-frequency vibrations shuddered through the deck plating as the Draxian tractor beam locked onto the dreadnought's hull, beginning the long tow toward the orbital command station. For hours they sat in darkness, listening to the quiet metallic clicks of weapons being checked and rechecked, each soldier lost in their own thoughts. Chun traced the infiltration route on her wrist-mounted tactical display one final time, studying every corridor and junction. The Synthari intelligence had provided complete schematics of the Draxian orbital station, detailed down to individual power conduits and maintenance access points. She glanced at the heavy equipment packs containing Coalition thermal lances and sleek Synthari phase cutters, contingencies layered upon contingencies. A Synthari warrior made brief eye contact with a Coalition Marine across the bay. The Marine gave a single sharp nod. They were ready, human and alien, united in purpose. The ship lurched suddenly, a heavy grinding shudder running through the entire structure. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic shriek that echoed through the hull. They had arrived at their destination. A quiet but steady voice whispered over their encrypted communications network. Torres, transmitting from light minutes away, her tone calm and reassuring. "Stand by, strike team. You're home." On the Phantom's bridge, stationed just outside the Phantom Shroud's boundary, Torres fixed her gaze on the tactical display. The Mercy of Krax appeared as a friendly icon, now docked with the massive enemy orbital station, a wolf in sheep's clothing positioned at the enemy's throat. Draven's holographic form stood beside her, utterly motionless as always. "The strike team is in position," Torres said quietly, her voice barely above a murmur. "Synthari team, status on the dissonance engine?" "We have primed the device and synchronized it to the station's primary power grid," Draven's flat voice replied. "The engine is ready for activation on your command, General. Initiate the broadcast." Draven's avatar nodded with mechanical precision. On Torres's display, the intricate, orderly web representing the Draxian psionic command network flared bright green, then dissolved into a chaotic mess of conflicting signals and interference patterns. "The engine is active and transmitting at full power," Draven reported. Torres activated her command link to the strike team. "Strike team, execute. I repeat, execute now." Aboard the Mercy of Krax, explosive charges detonated simultaneously, blowing the cargo bay doors inward with a deafening concussion that reverberated through the docking area. Lieutenant Chun and her team stormed through the smoking breach, fanning out into predetermined positions with practiced efficiency. Draxian technicians on duty looked up from their workstations, their expressions shifting from routine boredom to confused panic in an instant. The strike team neutralized them quickly with stun weapons and restraints, then melted into the service corridors like ghosts. Alarm consoles remained dormant and silent, exactly as planned. They encountered scattered patrols of Draxian guards, but these warriors seemed disoriented and argumentative, their command authority structure shattered by the dissonance engine's broadcast. The human synthery teams moved through them in a synchronized dance of precision strikes and stun blasts, leaving unconscious bodies in their wake. They advanced rapidly through the station's interior until they encountered an obstacle, an unexpected security blast door that shouldn't have been there according to the schematics. Recent addition, a Synthari warrior stated beside her, his tone clinical, logical precaution, ultimately futile. "Breach it," Chen ordered sharply. A Marine brought a thermal lance forward, the cutting tool roaring to life and carving a glowing orange circle through the hardened metal alloy. They kicked the circular slab free and poured through the opening, finding themselves in the command center's antechamber, the throne room's outer defense. Chen kicked open the massive inner doors with her augmented boot. Inside, Supreme Warlord Krax stood beside his command throne, bellowing incoherently in rage, his eyes wild and unfocused. His personal guards stared at him with open suspicion and fear rather than loyalty, their psionic link to his authority completely severed, replaced by paranoid uncertainty. To them, their supreme warlord had transformed into a raving madman screaming incomprehensible orders. Krax saw the strike team breach his sanctum and roared with primal fury, raising his massive gravitational hammer high. Before he could bring the devastating weapon down in a crushing arc, a Synthari warrior fired a precision stun charge. The Supreme Warlord, conqueror of 15 star systems and self-proclaimed master of warriors, collapsed in a heap of armor plating and unconscious flesh. Chen kept her breathing steady despite her racing heart, her voice professionally calm. "Spearhead to command. The primary target is secured. I repeat, primary target is secured." Aboard the Phantom, Torres exhaled tension she hadn't realized she was holding, her shoulders dropping with relief. "The war," she murmured to no one in particular, "is over." Arbiter Kalos's diplomatic vessel, the Radiant Herald, was an elegant sculpture of crystalline energy and exotic matter that moved through space with effortless grace and speed. Kalos stood on its bridge, his form radiating calm, authoritative confidence as the vessel dropped out of faster-than-light transit at Draxus Prime's designated coordinates. He had departed expecting to observe the chaos of honorable battle, fleets arrayed in proper formation, exchanging fire according to protocol. Instead, he found peace. The combined human synthery fleet maintained steady orbit around the planet in perfect formation. The massive Draxian orbital station hung in space, with all weapons systems powered down and running lights indicating complete surrender. In fact, the station was broadcasting messages of unconditional capitulation on every available frequency. The space surrounding the planet was eerily calm. Radiation levels normal, debris fields absent. The scene radiated tranquility. Kalos's crystalline form flickered with profound confusion, his light patterns becoming discordant and agitated. This was fundamentally wrong, completely inconceivable according to his understanding of warfare. A communication request appeared on his console. General Elena Torres was inviting him to come aboard the Draxian Orbital Command Station personally. Synthari guards, their footsteps absolutely silent on the deck plating, escorted Arbiter Kalos onto the captured station's bridge. Draxian officers, stripped of their armor and weapons, their postures defeated and eyes vacant with shock, were being systematically led away by Coalition Marines. Synthari warriors stood at guard positions throughout the command center, their biomechanical forms utterly still. General Torres was waiting for him, casually leaning against the central command throne with a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. Fleetmaster Draven stood beside her in his characteristic motionless stance. Kalos's crystalline form strobed violently, his stable column of light wavering into chaotic patterns. Discordant clashing harmonics scraped through the air, his translator struggling to render his agitation. "Where is the battle, General?" his device demanded. "Where is the engagement? I traveled here to mediate the glorious honorable conflict as mandated by the protocols." Torres took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, savoring the moment. She looked at the frantic pillar of agitated light, then gestured casually with her mug toward the main view screen, displaying the peaceful planet below. "Mediation is unnecessary, Arbiter," she said, her voice calm and even. "We had a war to conclude." She set her mug down on Krax's throne armrest with deliberate casualness. "You wanted an honorable stand-up engagement. Ships arranged in neat rows. Warriors facing warriors, blood and glory and noble sacrifice. The problem is that the Draxians shared your philosophy completely. They were so focused on finding that honorable direct confrontation that they were utterly unprepared for an opponent who simply removed their ability to fight before they even realized the real battle had begun." She met his agitated gaze directly, her expression hardening with satisfaction. An opponent who only discovers they're in a fight after they've already been defeated is an opponent who has fundamentally lost before the first shot is fired. She gestured broadly at the surrendered planet, the captured warlord being led away in restraints, the pacified fleet broadcasting submission. "The war is concluded, Arbiter. Finished. Done." Kalos stood in absolute silence, his light dimming significantly, the furious strobing fading to a faint, uncertain pulse. His translator emitted only a weak, bewildered hum of confusion. Reality had just demolished his entire philosophical framework, his carefully constructed worldview of honor and glorious battle and noble sacrifice, smashing it against the unyielding wall of practical effectiveness and strategic thinking. Torres sat in her office, aboard the Vanguard several days later, methodically compiling her official after-action report. She included everything with meticulous detail: the secret alliance with the Synthari, Operation Inferiority Complex, the staged battle, the Trojan horse infiltration, the dissonance engine. She cataloged every deception, every violation of the Valdris protocols, every dishonorable act in comprehensive detail, holding nothing back. She had committed what the Conclave defined as war crimes. The completed report transmitted across the stars to Coalition High Command, a complete confession of her actions. The decision was now in their hands. She would face court-martial and spend the rest of her life in a military prison, or they would create a new medal specifically to honor what she had accomplished. Frankly, either outcome seemed equally probable at this point. Her console chimed with an incoming communication. The caller identification showed Draven. "General," his characteristically flat voice stated, "a matter of significant political interest. The Synthari Collective has formally petitioned the Galactic Conclave to ratify a new amendment to the Valdris Protocols." Torres raised an eyebrow with interest. "I certainly hope you haven't suddenly developed an appreciation for honorable suicidal combat, Fleet Master." "Negative," Draven replied without inflection. "We have proposed what we are designating the Torres Doctrine. It formally permits unconventional strategic responses when facing a numerically or technologically superior adversary whose operational doctrine is demonstrably inflexible and rigid." Torres blinked in surprise. "You're citing this entire operation as legal precedent for future conflicts?" "We are citing your victory as a logical imperative for species survival," Draven corrected with his usual precision. "Survival is the ultimate logic that supersedes all other considerations. The Conclave must adapt its protocols to accommodate effective strategy or become obsolete and irrelevant." Torres looked through her viewport at the distant glimmer of Kalos's diplomatic ship, the Radiant Herald, its beautiful crystalline form preparing to engage faster than light drive and depart. She could almost imagine the bewildered silence pervading his bridge, the fundamental confusion of a being whose entire worldview had been shattered. The galaxy had fundamentally changed today, whether it fully understood that yet or not. "Your methods are chaotic, General," Draven's synthesized voice stated, breaking through her contemplation. "So I've been told repeatedly," she replied with dry amusement. "They are, however, fundamentally logical in their outcomes," Draven continued. "From a Synthari, that represented the highest possible compliment, an acknowledgement of profound respect." Torres smiled slightly at the recognition. Later, Torres walked through the captured Draxian command station's mess hall, a cavernous space that had once echoed with the roaring voices of conquering warriors, now filled with a quieter, more purposeful activity. Coalition Marines were attempting to explain a human card game to a group of attentive Synthari warriors. Synthari soldiers were demonstrating the proper maintenance procedures for their complex energy weapons to fascinated Coalition engineers. Lieutenant Chun sat at a table with her squad, consuming standard ration packs with the enthusiasm of soldiers who had survived something extraordinary. Spotting Torres, she immediately jumped to her feet and delivered a crisp salute. Torres waved her down with a casual gesture. "At ease, Lieutenant. You've more than earned the rest." "It feels better this way, ma'am," Chin said, her gaze steady and clear with conviction. "Winning without watching our people die pointlessly." "Yes," Torres agreed softly, her voice carrying weight. "It absolutely does." She thought about the 2,117 casualties from the Honorable Battle Commander Hayes had been forced to fight according to protocol. Then she looked at the men and women in this room, the ones who had seized the enemy's command center with minimal casualties, who had ended a war through intelligence rather than attrition. The choice the Conclave had presented, between honorable death and dishonorable life, had been a fundamentally false choice, an illusion crafted by beings who had forgotten what soldiers actually fought and died for, who had lost sight of the purpose behind warfare. Torres found a quiet observation point near a viewport overlooking the planet. She leaned against the cool metal bulkhead, sipping another cup of bitter coffee. Outside, Drax's prime sun rose over the curve of their former oppressor's homeworld, a liberated planet whose people were now free from the iron fist of Krax and his warrior legions. The galaxy was incrementally safer, incrementally more rational. She finished her coffee slowly, savoring the moment of quiet victory. She had won this war, and she had done it her way, the human way, with deception and creativity, and a refusal to accept that the only path to victory ran through mountains of her own people's corpses. 6 months later, the Galactic Conclave convened an extraordinary session to vote on the proposed Torres Doctrine Amendment to the Valdris Protocols. Arbiter Kalos stood before the assembly, his crystalline form noticeably dimmer than before, less certain in its glow. "The proposal before this body," he began, his translated voice, lacking its former absolute conviction, "represents a fundamental challenge to principles we have held for generations." He paused, his light patterns shifting uncertainly. General Torres's actions violated every precept of honorable warfare. She employed deception, misdirection, psychological manipulation, and infiltration. She won her war without a single major fleet engagement, without the glory of ship-to-ship combat, without the honor of warriors facing each other across the void. Another pause, longer this time. "And yet," Kalos continued, his voice quieter, her victory was absolute. "The Draxian Dominion, which had resisted our honorable fleets for decades and inflicted catastrophic casualties on multiple species, collapsed in a matter of weeks. Their supreme warlord is imprisoned, their worlds are liberated, their military is disbanded, and the human coalition suffered minimal casualties achieving this outcome. He looked across the assembled species representatives. The Synthari have presented comprehensive data demonstrating that adherence to rigid honorable combat protocols results in casualty rates 300 to 500% higher than flexible strategic approaches. They argue, with substantial evidence, that we have been sacrificing millions of lives on the altar of an aesthetic preference, a performance we value more than the actual survival of the soldiers we command. The chamber was silent, species that had mocked humanity's proposal months ago now listening intently. The Torres doctrine proposes that when facing an opponent whose doctrine is demonstrably inflexible, defending species may employ unconventional methods including, but not limited to, strategic deception, psychological warfare, infiltration operations, and tactical misdirection. Kalos's form pulsed slowly. I have spent considerable time contemplating General Torres's statement to me aboard that captured station. She said that an opponent who discovers they are in a fight only after they have already lost is an opponent who has fundamentally failed. His light steadied. After extensive reflection and analysis of casualty data across multiple conflicts, I have concluded that she was correct. The Valdris protocols, as currently structured, prioritize the appearance of honor over the preservation of life. We have been conducting wars as theater rather than as the serious business of survival and protection they should be. He drew himself up. The Crystallian Consensus, after internal debate, has decided to support the Torres Doctrine Amendment. We recommend its ratification. The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Torres Doctrine was ratified as Valdris Protocol Amendment 847, fundamentally changing the nature of warfare in the galaxy. Species would still be encouraged to resolve conflicts honorably when possible, but they would no longer be criminally prohibited from thinking strategically, from valuing the lives of their soldiers over the aesthetic quality of their battles. Torres watched the vote results from her office, aboard the Vanguard, now officially promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of an entire sector. Commander Hayes stood beside her, a proud smile on his face. "You changed the galaxy, Admiral," he said quietly. "We changed it," Torres corrected. Every person who refused to accept that honor meant suicide, every strategist who valued results over performance, every soldier who came home alive because we were willing to be called dishonorable. This wasn't just me, Commander. This was humanity remembering what warfare is actually for. Her console displayed another communication, this one from Coalition High Command. She opened it, reading quickly, then smiled. "Well, that answers one question," she said, showing Hayes the message. Coalition High Command had not only declined to court-martial her, they had officially adopted the Torres strategic methodology as standard doctrine for all coalition forces. Furthermore, they were establishing an academy dedicated to teaching unconventional warfare, strategic deception, and what they were calling pragmatic victory operations. They wanted her to lead it. An entire academy dedicated to teaching aliens how to think like humans, Hayes said, laughing. The Conclave is going to regret opening this particular door. Perhaps, Torres said thoughtfully, or perhaps they'll finally start winning wars at acceptable cost instead of creating glorious monuments to futile sacrifice. She looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy full of species now permitted to value survival over spectacle, results over ritual. Humanity had given the galaxy something precious, permission to be smart instead of suicidal, effective instead of honorable to the point of extinction. A final message appeared on her console, this one from Fleetmaster Draven. It was characteristically brief. "General Torres, the Synthari collective wishes to express gratitude. Your species has introduced a logical framework for survival that was absent from galactic strategic thinking. We anticipate productive future cooperation. Additionally, we have analyzed your historical database. The Trojan horse stratagem is merely one example among thousands. We request access to your complete military history archives. The tactical applications appear substantial. Torres smiled and began composing her reply, approving the archive access request. If the galaxy wanted to learn how humans fought wars, she would teach them everything. Sun Tzu and Clausewitz, Hannibal and Alexander, every brilliant tactical mind humanity had produced across millennia of creative, chaotic, gloriously effective warfare. They had banned humanity's war strategy because no one could beat it. Now, humanity would teach that strategy to everyone willing to learn, transforming the galaxy one pragmatic victory at a time. The age of honorable suicide was ending. The age of intelligent warfare was beginning. And at the center of it all stood one human admiral who had refused to sacrifice her people for someone else's definition of honor, who had valued lives over aesthetics, who had remembered that the purpose of military force was victory and survival, not performance and martyrdom. Torres raised her coffee mug in a solitary toast to the stars, to the future, to the countless lives that would be saved, because someone had finally been willing to say that winning dishonorably was infinitely preferable to losing with honor. The galaxy was learning what humanity had always known. In war, there is no honor in death, only in bringing your people home alive. Everything else is just theater.